There's something sacred about the moment before a bath, the warmth, the quiet, the promise of peace. But for women over 70, that calm can mask hidden risks. Evelyn, 74, learned this when a simple oversight left her lightheaded and scared on the bathroom floor. One missed habit, hydration, nearly changed everything. Her story reminds us that even the gentlest routines deserve thoughtful care, because sometimes the smallest steps we skip are the ones that matter most. Let's begin with Evelyn's first shift. One character's backstory. Evelyn wasn't always so cautious. For years she'd prided herself on efficiency: coffee, emails, a quick sweep through the house, and then a long, relaxing bath. It was her version of control. The bath wasn't just hygiene, it was a daily escape, a pocket of peace in a world where most things felt rushed or forgotten. Her mornings were often busy with small tasks: dusting old picture frames, sorting mail, pulling out a scarf she hadn't worn in months. All tiny rituals, born out of habit and comfort. Water, that could wait. She didn't feel thirsty, and besides, she was going to soak. Wasn't that hydration enough? There's a myth many carry past 70. If you're not thirsty, you don't need water. Evelyn believed it too. She didn't think about how warm baths dilate blood vessels, lower blood pressure, or how aging affects thirst cues. She just knew her knees ached less in the tub, and her mind felt lighter afterward. But that one fainting spell, soft, sudden, and silent, shook her. It made her realize she'd been ignoring her body's needs in the name of routine. That was the moment something shifted. She began to ask herself, what does my body need before I step into care? That question, so simple, began to reshape her mornings. Evelyn's new habit began with resistance. She hated feeling like she was adding steps to something sacred. She didn't want to turn her bath into a checklist. But one morning she left a small glass of room temperature water on the bathroom sink, just to try. She sipped it slowly, leaning against the counter. No music, no distractions. Just her and that quiet moment of preparation. At first, it felt silly. But something strange happened. She felt present. Her head didn't buzz when she stood up after the soak. Her hands didn't tremble when she reached for the towel. And she realized the water wasn't just physical, it was emotional grounding. Hydrating before bathing isn't about quenching thirst, it's about stabilizing blood pressure, maintaining balance, and preventing the dizziness that often leads to slips and accidents. Warm water relaxes the body, but can also drop your internal temperature and blood pressure fast, especially if you're already slightly dehydrated. Evelyn committed to this small act, one glass every time. She even added a slice of cucumber or mint some mornings, something to make it feel intentional, like a ritual rather than a rule. She now calls it her pause glass, a quiet signal to her body: you matter, I'm listening. Her once overlooked moment had become a miniature ceremony of care. What began as a simple safety step became something deeper for Evelyn. It wasn't just water, it was acknowledgement. At 74, she'd spent so much of her life caring for others, giving energy, solving problems, saying yes. Drinking water before a bath wasn't about hydration anymore. It became a statement: I deserve to care for myself gently. She noticed the change. Her mood lifted. Her baths became more restorative, less foggy. She no longer rushed in to escape the morning, but entered prepared, balanced. And over time she began to teach others. Her niece, who works in elder care, even started sharing Evelyn's tip with clients: water before warmth. For those watching, here's how to start like Evelyn. Keep a glass near the bathroom sink, room temp or warm, not cold. Add a sensory element like lemon or cucumber to create ritual. Sip slowly, standing or sitting, before running the bath. Use the pause to check in. Is my mind calm? Is my body steady? Evelyn's story isn't about fear, it's about intention. One glass of water, one breath of stillness, one less accident waiting in silence, and one small choice that proves we still have the power to change, to protect and to love ourselves, every single morning. The journey towards safer, more intentional bathing began with something deceptively simple: a glass of water, that first habit, hydrating before entering the bed, became more than just a safety measure. It was a quiet declaration of self-worth, a moment of pause that changed how Evelyn approached her mornings. She had spent decades moving quickly, tending to others, rushing from one task to the next. But that glass of water marked a shift, an inward turn toward honoring her needs before anything else. It was in those quiet, hydrated moments, just standing with the glass in hand, that she began to notice something else. Her thoughts, her emotions, her memories. The silence that had once felt peaceful, now sometimes brought things she hadn't prepared for: grief, worry, old conversations replaying. It wasn't just her body that needed care before the bath. It was her mind too, and so began the next part of her transformation. Because, as it turned out, water wasn't the only thing she had been skipping. Sometimes she walked into the bathroom carrying a storm of emotion she hadn't even noticed. And just like stepping in without hydration, entering the bath in that state had its own hidden risks, ones she didn't see coming until the water was already running. What no one warned her about, what no one ever really talks about, is how emotionally vulnerable the bath can be. For Evelyn, the bath had always been a refuge, but refuge becomes fragile when it's entered during emotional overwhelm. The water amplifies everything: joy, yes, but also sorrow, anxiety, confusion. And for older women especially, who've lived full, layered lives, that emotional residue doesn't always wash off so easily. She began to recognize a pattern. The days when she felt unsteady getting in or lightheaded weren't just tied to hydration. They were also the days when she had unresolved thoughts swirling in her head, a bad dream, a voicemail she didn't know how to return, an anniversary she didn't mention aloud. These weren't just distractions, they were emotional weights, and stepping into a bath with those weights meant she wasn't fully present, wasn't balanced, not physically, not emotionally. The second habit she had to learn was more subtle than the first: never bathe when emotionally distracted or overwhelmed. It sounds gentle, but the impact is profound. Emotional imbalance can lead to physical imbalance, especially in a slippery, humid space. This wasn't about suppressing emotion, it was about pausing long enough to recognize what she was carrying before the water carried it further. One morning, Evelyn caught herself standing in the doorway of the bathroom, towel in hand, but completely lost in thought. She didn't even remember turning on the light. Her eyes were red, not from sleep, but from tears that hadn't yet fallen. It had been her late sister's birthday the day before, and though she hadn't said anything to anyone, the memory had followed her like fog. She realized her mind was racing, her breath shallow. If she had stepped into the water that way, she might not have noticed the slippery mat. She might not have reacted fast enough if she lost balance. That day, she sat down on the edge of her bed instead, just for a minute. And in that minute she cried, she breathed, she acknowledged what was happening inside. That minute saved her, not just from a physical accident, but from pretending she was fine when she wasn't. From that point on, Evelyn added another step to her pre-bath ritual: an emotional check-in. She didn't journal every day or meditate in silence. Sometimes she just asked herself, "Am I okay right now?" If the answer was uncertain, she paused, and that pause was everything. 2. Never bathe when emotionally distracted. The second habit Evelyn developed wasn't loud or complicated. It didn't involve buying anything or learning a new routine. It was a habit of awareness. Before every bath, she gave herself space. Not just physical space, but mental space. Sometimes that meant standing still in the hallway for a moment. Sometimes it meant lighting a soft-scented candle to ground herself. She started keeping a notepad near the bathroom, not to write novels, just to jot down any lingering thoughts, appointments, memories, feelings. It cleared her mind the way someone might clear a counter before setting something delicate on it. Why does this matter? Because emotion affects the body. Anxiety can cause tremors. Grief slows reflexes. Overthinking distracts from safe movements. The mind and body are not separate, and nowhere is that more true than when stepping into hot water, where everything softens at once. Evelyn's new ritual became her quiet armor: one breath in, one thought named aloud, a short sit on the bed if needed, a weather check for the mind before water touched her skin. These weren't dramatic changes, but they were profound. They gave her back control, not just of her environment, but of her emotional presence. And with that, she began to enter the bath, not just safely but fully, with emotional awareness now woven into her pre-bathing ritual. Evelyn began to notice something else: the way her body responded when her mind was clear. Her balance improved, her movements became more intentional, her breath settled. That single pause for emotional check-in had rewired more than her routine. It had deepened her trust in herself. Where once she entered the bath by habit, she now entered it with presence. That presence revealed subtle things she'd overlooked for years: the creak in her knee after certain chores, the shortness of breath after bending down, the warm flush in her cheeks after walking briskly around the house. She was learning to listen, not just to her thoughts, but to the tempo of her physical energy. Building on this momentum, Evelyn began to understand that caring for herself meant not only preparing emotionally, but also knowing when her body wasn't ready. She had mastered stillness. Now she needed to master timing. Because there was another hidden risk, one that felt deceptively productive, and it lived in those moments when she finished her chores, wiped the sweat from her brow, and thought, "Now I've earned my soak." What she didn't realize was that her body needed more than reward. It needed recovery. The next shift in Evelyn's journey came from something so ordinary, so ingrained, that it had never occurred to her as a risk: bathing too soon after physical activity. She had grown up in a household where hard work was followed by washing up, simple, logical, unquestioned. But as her body aged, that sequence stopped serving her. The heat of exertion mixed with the heat of the water, in ways she hadn't expected. She would feel dizzy, drained, sometimes even nauseous. The transition from activity to stillness was too abrupt. Her circulation hadn't caught up. Her body was still in motion, while her mind was already seeking rest. And that mismatch, she realized, was dangerous. This led her to the third habit she now holds close: never bathe immediately after physical activity, not even light chores, not even gardening, not even a long walk through the kitchen putting dishes away. Because physical activity, no matter how mild, elevates heart rate, widens blood vessels, and temporarily shifts blood flow patterns, especially in older bodies. Stepping into a warm bath right after that can cause blood pressure to drop too quickly. It wasn't about doing less. It was about learning when to pause. Again, one day, Evelyn had just finished reorganizing her hallway closet. It wasn't heavy labor, just sorting, bending, lifting small things. She felt good, accomplished, even a little energized. As usual, she made her way to the bathroom, turned on the water, and reached for her favorite eucalyptus towel. But halfway through her bath, something felt off. Her chest tightened, her fingers tingled. She got lightheaded again, not like the first time, but enough to scare her. That experience made her pause the next time. Instead of heading straight for the bathroom, she sat down on her armchair near the window. 10 minutes passed, then 15. She read a page of a book, drank a bit of water, and only then, feeling more grounded, did she begin her bath. The difference was dramatic. No dizzy spells, no shortness of breath. And from that moment forward, she changed the sequence. She realized that the rush to relax had become its own form of stress. Even when the body seemed quiet, it was still processing the effort it had just made. For Evelyn, the lesson was no longer about slowing down for safety. It was about creating space for the body to catch up to the spirit. 3. Never bathe right after physical activity. Evelyn began treating the time between activity and bathing as its own ritual, a recovery window. She gave her body time to settle, and it made all the difference. She noticed that when she waited, her muscles felt less tense in the water, her heart rate stayed steady, her mind was more at ease. The new habit looked like this. After any physical activity, she set a timer for 15 minutes. She sat or reclined, never laying fully flat. She drank water slowly, allowing her system to recalibrate. She performed a body scan, checking for lingering effort, heartbeat, breath, tension. She even began scheduling her baths like appointments, not spontaneous, but intentional. If she cleaned in the morning, she bathed in the afternoon. If she took a walk after dinner, she bathed the next morning instead. It gave her rhythm, a cadence her body could depend on. And in that cadence, Evelyn found relief, not just from the risk, but from the pressure to hurry. She had thought she was treating herself by jumping into the bath after chores, but in truth, the real treat was waiting, letting the body rest before the reward. By pausing after physical activity, and learning to listen to the signals of her body, Evelyn discovered something more profound than just improved safety. She discovered timing. The shift in her bath routine wasn't just about prevention anymore. It was about honoring the natural rhythms of an aging body, something that had quietly gone unacknowledged for too long. The patience she learned gave her back more than balance. It gave her back control. With so much already achieved, Evelyn found herself feeling stronger, more centered, and more aware. Her routines now reflected self-awareness instead of autopilot, and with each new habit, her confidence returned, not the boldness of youth, but a calm inner authority that said, "I know what I need." But even with all these inner shifts, one last piece remained, something external, visible, often dismissed. She had tended to her hydration, emotions, and energy. But what about her surroundings? Because a peaceful bath isn't only about how we feel inside, it's also about the space we step into. And that space, Evelyn realized, could either protect her or betray her. The final habit Evelyn embraced was rooted in environment. She had done the work inside, body and mind aligned, but her surroundings still operated on assumptions from decades ago. Her bathroom looked the same as it always had. Same towel hook placement, same low lighting, same smooth floor she used to dance across barefoot, but she wasn't the same. Her reflexes were slower now, her depth perception slightly off. Her balance, while improved, was still vulnerable in heat and steam. What once felt familiar had quietly become hazardous. And so the fourth habit came into view. Never bathe without a safety check of your space. Not a full renovation, not expensive upgrades, just awareness, just adjustments. Evelyn began to see her bathroom differently, not as a fixture, but as a living part of her daily practice, a place she could either ignore or shape. This habit became her outer expression of all the inner care she'd built, and in turning her attention to her environment, she completed the full circle of transformation, from within and without. The moment that changed Evelyn's view of her bathroom wasn't dramatic, it was quiet. She reached for a towel, hung too far from the tub, something she had done for years. But this time, her foot slipped ever so slightly, just a shuffle, but it was enough. Her body froze, her breath caught. For a split second, her world narrowed into fear. She didn't fall, but the message was clear. This wasn't about strength, it was about setup. That evening, she took inventory. The bath mat was worn thin. The towel rack made her stretch too far. The overhead light left shadows near the tub edge. None of these things had felt wrong before. But now, with a body she was learning to respect, they were unacceptable. She moved the towel hook within easy reach, swapped the mat for a thick grip one, added a motion light with soft, even glow. These weren't just upgrades, they were affirmations. I will not let habit endanger me. I will meet myself where I am now. This wasn't caution, it was care. Mature, intentional, lasting care. 4. Never bathe without a safety check. The fourth habit came with a checklist, not complicated, but crucial. Evelyn called it her pre-bath sweep, and it became as natural as brushing her teeth. And it started with lighting. She made sure the path from her bedroom to the bathroom was well lit, not just the bathroom itself. No sudden transitions from dark to bright. Next came surfaces. She checked the floor for drops of water, curling edges of mats, anything that could become a hazard. She kept a towel within arm's reach of the tub. No more leaning. No more stretching. She wore slippers with tread. She installed a simple grip bar. Not a medical-looking one, but a modern design that matched her decor. Most importantly, she made space. Her bathroom became quieter, not cluttered with unnecessary baskets or items she didn't use. She cleared the edges. She simplified what stayed. This habit grounded her. It reminded her that while she couldn't control aging, she could control what surrounded her, and that gave her a new kind of freedom. The freedom to move without fear. With her environment now aligned with her awareness, Evelyn no longer saw her bath as something to manage. It became something to welcome. The rituals were now complete. Hydration, emotion, recovery, and space. Each one a layer of self-respect. Each one a thread in the fabric of her daily healing. She wasn't trying to reclaim who she had been. She was protecting who she had become. Every step in this journey brought her closer to a life designed for clarity, for grace, for continuation. She hadn't simply adapted. She had redefined what it means to grow older. The towel hung just within reach. The water warmed slowly. The light gently filled the room. Her steps were deliberate, but not hesitant. This wasn't fear. This was presence. And in that presence, Evelyn didn't feel limited. She felt powerful, not because everything was perfect, but because everything was finally hers to choose. The transformation was not in doing more, but in knowing what not to do. And now, there was only one thing left to do. Live, calmly, one thoughtful bath at a time. With her space now transformed into a sanctuary, Evelyn had brought every part of her bathing ritual into alignment. Mind, body, and environment. The changes weren't dramatic at first glance, but together they added up to a life that felt safer, calmer, and more self-honoring. Her days no longer drifted by in habit. Each step she took was part of something bigger. These habits didn't just protect her. They reminded her who she was, someone still worthy of intention, someone still choosing presence over panic. Evelyn's mornings had changed, so had her sense of identity. No longer did she approach the bath with unconscious routine. Now every part of the process reflected care, and still something remained. As her transformation neared its peak, Evelyn noticed subtle gaps, moments before and after the bath, that still held tension or disconnect. With the foundational pieces in place, she began to ask what finishes the ritual. What final habits ensure that this wasn't just a new checklist, but a new way to live? The answers came quietly, in small shifts, and they brought everything full circle. The final 3 habits Evelyn adopted weren't about safety or preparation, they were about integration. While the first 4 habits focused on avoiding risks and improving the physical and emotional process of bathing, these final ones were different. They were about what comes next. After all, what's the point of a healing ritual if it's followed by chaos, noise, or stress? Evelyn realized that the way she exited her bath mattered just as much as how she entered it, and that insight opened the door to 3 final changes. Ones that didn't just maintain her peace, but magnified it. These last habits became her anchor. They helped her carry the calm she cultivated in the water into the rest of her day. They weren't about fear or correction. They were about amplification, extending the benefits of everything she'd worked so hard to build. This was the culmination of her journey. With these last steps, her ritual became a lifestyle, a structure she could rely on, a rhythm that supported her joy, her balance, and her ability to thrive well beyond the bath itself. It started with a question she hadn't asked herself in years. How do I want to feel after this? That question changed everything. Evelyn began to notice that after her bath, despite all her new care, she sometimes returned too quickly to a noisy kitchen, an unfinished task, or a loud TV show. The piece she had worked for evaporated in minutes. So she experimented. One day after her bath, she didn't reach for her phone. She didn't turn on the news. Instead, she sat in her robe by the window. She let her hair dry naturally. She journaled one sentence: "I feel calm." And for the first time in a long time, She carried that calm into the next hour. It lingered through lunch. It followed her into the late afternoon. She began to feel like herself, more whole, more in rhythm with her surroundings. The breakthrough wasn't in doing something new, it was in protecting what she'd already earned. And so the final 3 habits came into her life, not to replace anything, but to preserve everything she'd already transformed. 5. Final 3 habits. Rest before re-entry. Evelyn learned to sit or lie down after bathing for at least 10 minutes. Not rushing into chores, not picking up the phone. This buffer helped her body normalize temperature, heart rate, and mood. It sealed the ritual in stillness. One thought, one word. As part of her post-bath moment, she'd write down one thought or word that reflected how she felt. Still, light, centered. It wasn't a diary, it was a moment of clarity. This habit allowed her to acknowledge her emotional state without overthinking. Light touch point. Before returning to the busyness of the day, Evelyn added one more layer, a soft scent, a calming playlist, or a warm drink. These small sensory touches reminded her body and brain that the peace she'd found in the water didn't have to end there. Together, these habits became the final piece. They weren't about doing more, they were about holding on to what mattered. Evelyn didn't just feel better, she felt extended. The peace followed her because she gave it permission to. With each layer of her ritual now complete, Evelyn no longer saw bathing as a break from her day, it became the center of it. A place where her mind, her body, and her home worked together. What began with a simple mistake had turned into a daily practice that reshaped how she moved through the world. These habits weren't grand declarations. They were quiet decisions, practiced again and again, but they had the power to protect her, to lift her, and to remind her of her worth. Every drop of water, every pause, every choice to wait or breathe or notice, these became Evelyn's new strength. And for anyone watching her journey unfold, the message was simple. You don't need to change everything. But when you change the moments that bookend your peace, you build a life around it. Evelyn's story didn't end with her transformation, it began with it, and in her calm, graceful routine, she found something she hadn't expected: the confidence to live forward, one bath at a time. Evelyn's story shows us that small, thoughtful habits can reshape our days and our lives. With every pause, every choice, she claimed peace, presence, and purpose. You can too. Start today, start gently, and let every bath become a step toward the strongest version of you.